Hello, and welcome to History at Bedtime. He ruled for so long that, by the time he died, most Egyptians alive had never known another king. For 66 or 67 years, depending on how the chronology is counted, Ramesses II sat on the throne of Egypt. Children were born under his rule, grew into adults, became parents, and watched their own children grow, while the same names still stood at the top of every temple inscription, every royal decree, every image of divine kingship carved into stone. The Nile rose and fell. Priests opened sanctuary doors before dawn. Scribes sharpened reed pens. Soldiers drilled in the delta. Workmen cut tomb chambers in the western cliffs of Thebes. Women ground grain, baked bread, carried water, nursed children, and prayed for safe births. And above all of them, in the official imagination of Egypt, there was Ramesses, son of Ra, beloved of Ammonius, ruler of the two lands, the king whose name seemed to become part of the landscape itself. He was called Usermater Setipenra Ramesses Miriamon. Modern history knows him as Ramesses II. Later admiration made him Ramesses the Great. The greatness was not invented from nothing. Ramesses built on a scale that still feels almost excessive even after 3,000 years. He filled Egypt and Nubia with statues, pylons, temples, reliefs, stelae, obelisks, and names. He raised a new royal city in the eastern Nile Delta. He carved his victory narrative into the walls of temples from Abydos to Abu Simbel. He presented himself as warrior, builder, husband, father, priest, God's beloved, and almost godlike presence. His face, repeated again and again, became one of the most recognizable faces of ancient kingship. But the more closely we look at him, the more interesting he becomes. Ramesses was not merely a heroic pharaoh from a postcard of Egypt. He was a ruler of genuine capacity and immense ego. He was brave in battle, but also a master of propaganda. He could turn a dangerous military crisis into a story of divine victory and make that story last longer than many empires. He negotiated one of the most famous diplomatic settlements of the ancient world with the Hittites, the other great power of his age. He loved Nefertari, or at least chose to display that love in unusually public and enduring ways. He fathered so many children that succession itself became a problem of time, because his own life outlasted son after son. He restored and extended the old image of the pharaoh as the living center of order after a century in which Egypt had been shaken by religious revolution, foreign rivalry, and the memory of instability. His reign stands near the last bright height of the Egyptian New Kingdom. Behind him lay the great age of conquest, of Thutmose III, Hatshepsut, Amenhotep III, Akhenaten, Horemheb, Seti I. Ahead lay pressure, Libyans, sea raiders, weakening international systems, grain troubles, priestly power, succession strain, and eventually the long decline of New Kingdom imperial reach. Ramesses did not live at the beginning of Egyptian greatness. He lived after centuries of greatness had already taught Egypt how to imagine itself. His genius was not to invent kingship, but to perform it so massively that his performance became almost indistinguishable from the idea of Egypt itself. To understand him, we have to begin before his birth, in the shadow of a different pharaoh whose name later kings tried to bury. About half a century before Ramesses II came to power, Egypt had passed through the Amarna period, one of the strangest and most disruptive episodes in its long history. Pharaoh Akhenaten, formerly Amenhotep IV, had elevated the Aten, the visible disk of the sun, above the traditional gods. He shifted royal attention away from Ammonius and the old temple networks, founded a new capital at Akhenaten, and reshaped royal art, ritual, and religious language around a radical solar devotion. How far this should be called monotheism remains debated, but to later Egyptians it looked like dangerous disorder. Temples had been neglected. Gods had been insulted. The balance of Ma'at, the order that made existence possible, had been disturbed. After Akhenaten's death, Egypt slowly reversed course. Tutankhamun restored older cults in name, but he died young. I ruled briefly. Horemheb, a soldier king with no surviving heir of his own, moved more decisively to erase the Amarna disruption and rebuild royal authority. Then came Ramesses I, the founder of the 19th dynasty, not from the old royal family, but from a military and administrative background in the eastern delta. His reign was short, but his son Seti I gave the dynasty weight. Seti I was one of the great kings of Egypt, though his son would overshadow him. He campaigned in the Levant, restored Egyptian prestige abroad, built beautifully, and honored the old gods with seriousness and elegance. His temple at Abydos remains one of the most refined monuments of Egyptian art. His tomb in the Valley of the Kings is among the most richly decorated royal tombs ever cut into the Theban cliffs. Seti was a restorer in the deepest Egyptian sense, not a revolutionary, but a king who made the world resemble what Egyptians believed it should have been all along. Ramesses grew up in this atmosphere of restoration. He was not raised in a weak court. He was trained by a father who understood war, ritual, architecture, and political theater. As a prince, Ramesses learned that a pharaoh did not simply govern. A pharaoh appeared. He appeared before gods in temple ritual, before soldiers in battle scenes, before officials in administration, before foreign powers in diplomacy, before the future in carved stone. To rule Egypt was to become an image powerful enough that the image itself helped rule. He probably came to the throne around 1279 BCE, after Seti's death, perhaps in his 20s. He was young enough to be vigorous and ambitious, old enough to have been prepared. From the beginning, his reign carried the confidence of a man who had been trained not to ask whether he deserved the throne, but how large he could make the throne appear. To understand the young Ramesses more fully, it helps to imagine the world of an Egyptian prince before he became a monument. A royal child did not grow up as an ordinary child. He was born into a court where every gesture had meaning and where the distance between family life and public symbolism was never clear. He would have seen scribes, priests, tutors, military officers, foreign envoys, nurses, attendants, craftsmen, and officials moving through spaces controlled by protocol. He would have learned that words could be ritual, that names had power, that images could preserve life, and that the king's body was not only private flesh but the sacred body through which Egypt understood itself. Ramesses's education would have included the arts of rule in several forms. He needed to understand writing even if scribes performed most writing for him. He needed to know how campaigns were organized, how offerings were made, how officials were ranked, how land and grain were counted, how temples were endowed, how foreign rulers were addressed, and how the old stories of Egypt framed the king's duties. A prince did not learn kingship only from lectures. He learned it by watching his father stand before gods, receive tribute, inspect troops, commission inscriptions, and make visible the connection between earthly authority and cosmic order. Seti I's influence therefore matters deeply. Seti gave Ramesses a model of disciplined kingship after disorder. He restored monuments damaged or neglected after Amarna. He honored Abydos, one of Egypt's most sacred places, associated with Osiris and with kingship's deep ancestral memory. He campaigned in Asia and Nubia. He built with a pharaoh at the center of such a system had enormous power, but not unlimited freedom. He had to feed temples without letting priesthoods become too powerful. He had to reward officials without letting them become rivals. He had to defend frontiers without exhausting the land. He had to appear victorious even when reality was complicated. He had to embody Ma'at, order, balance, truth, rightful arrangement. And because Egyptian kingship was sacred, failure was never merely political. A failed pharaoh meant a world out of alignment. Ramesses understood this. He spent his reign making alignment visible. One of his first great acts was to strengthen the eastern delta as a royal and military center. There, near the older site of Avaris and at the place now associated with Cantir, he developed Pi-Ramesses, the House of Ramesses. This was not a remote ceremonial capital built only for memory. It was strategically placed. From the delta, Egypt faced the Levant. Armies could move toward Canaan and Syria. Chariot forces could be trained and deployed. Foreign envoys could be received closer to the northern world where Egyptian imperial interests were most urgent. Pi-Ramesses was a statement in mud brick: palace, temple, water, road, stable, and workshop. It had royal residences, military installations, storage spaces, and chariotry infrastructure. It stood in a landscape tied to both Egyptian tradition and foreign memory, because the Eastern Delta had once been associated with the Hyksos, the foreign rulers whose expulsion centuries earlier had helped launch Egypt's new kingdom imperial drive. By building there, Ramesses did not flee the old centers of Memphis and Thebes. He added another center, one that looked toward Asia. That direction mattered because the eastern Mediterranean world of Ramesses was not empty space waiting for Egypt. It was a crowded diplomatic and military field. The Hittite Empire, based in Anatolia, had become Egypt's great rival in Syria. Between them lay cities and territories whose loyalty could shift under pressure: Amurru, Upi, Kadesh, and others. These places were not simply dots on a map. They were corridors of trade, tribute, military movement, and prestige. To control them was to prove that one's empire still mattered beyond its own core land. Pi-Ramesses added another dimension: the world of chariots, horses, and international contact. The Eastern Delta was well suited for military preparation and communication with Asia. There were open spaces for chariot training, access to routes northward, and connections to older settlements. Archaeological work at Cantir has revealed traces of workshops and installations associated with chariotry and palace life. The city was not merely a residence. It was a machine for projecting Egyptian power into the Levant. Imagine the city in its prime: canals and water channels reflecting palace walls, stables filled with horses, animals expensive to maintain and crucial to elite warfare, chariot wheels, leather fittings, bronze elements, bows, arrows, helmets, harnesses, and repair workshops, foreign envoys waiting with gifts, officials recording deliveries, soldiers practicing maneuvers, priests serving temples, royal women and children living within palatial spaces. The capital would have smelled of water, animals, mud brick, incense, sweat, and polished wood. Its splendor was practical as well as ceremonial. The chariot, like the temple, was a technology of status. In the late Bronze Age, chariot warfare required horses, trained crews, specialized equipment, and logistical support. A chariot was not a simple cart. It was light, fast, and expensive. It gave elite warriors mobility and visibility. On reliefs, the king in his chariot becomes an image of perfect command. Horses synchronized, body balanced, bow drawn, enemies thrown into disorder. Real chariot warfare was more chaotic, but the image mattered because it represented royal mastery over speed, violence, and danger. At night, Pi-Ramesses would not have been silent. Horses shifted in their stables. Smiths and leather workers prepared fittings for chariots. Scribes checked stores of grain, weapons, linen, oil, and fodder. Foreign messengers waited in courtyards where Egyptian officials measured every word. The delta air carried moisture, river smell, animal breath, smoke, and the sharp anxiety of a capital built close to the direction from which war might come. The older sacred cities of Memphis and Thebes carried ancestral weight, but Pi-Ramesses looked outward. It was a city of frontiers, wheels, horses, envoys, and readiness. In such a place, a young king could imagine himself not only heir to Egypt's past, but commander of its future. Seti I had already campaigned in the region. Ramesses wanted to secure it more decisively. His early reign, therefore, moved toward the event that would define his public image more than any other, the Battle of Kadesh. Kadesh was fought around 1274 BCE, in the 5th year of Ramesses's reign, near the Orontes River in what is now Syria. The enemy was not a minor local prince, but the Hittite King Muwatalli II, commander of a sophisticated power with its own armies, vassals, intelligence networks, and diplomatic reach. Both sides understood the stakes. This was not only about one city. It was about the balance between the two strongest powers of the late Bronze Age Near East. The Egyptian army marched north in 4 divisions, each named for a major god: Ammonius, Ra, Ta, and Seth. Ramesses was with the Ammonius division at the front. The army stretched along the route, which made it vulnerable if the enemy knew where and when to strike. Near Kadesh, Ramesses received information from 2 men who claimed the Hittite army was far away. They were almost certainly that was not the same as victory. The crisis of Kadesh is gripping because it contains one of the oldest recognizable military mistakes: bad intelligence accepted too quickly. Ramesses advanced believing the Hittites were not close. His army was divided. His leading unit was exposed. The enemy struck an isolated part of the force. Communication and timing failed. In modern terms, the campaign shows the danger of overconfidence, deception, and dispersed columns in hostile territory. The ancient account wraps this in divine drama, but the underlying military problem is very human. The 2 false informants are especially important. They show that the Hittites understood intelligence warfare. They did not only wait with chariots. They manipulated Ramesses's perception. A battlefield is shaped not only by ground and weapons, but by what commanders believe is true. For a few critical hours, Ramesses believed a false world. The Hittites used that false world to attack the real one. When the Ra division broke, the crisis would have been terrifying. Men running from a shattered formation can spread panic faster than enemy weapons. Fleeing soldiers carry news in the worst possible form, not words, but bodies moving the wrong way. Camp followers, animals, equipment, and royal attendants all could have been thrown into confusion. In such moments, the difference between a damaged army and a destroyed army can be a single visible point of resistance. Ramesses made himself that point, or at least his inscriptions insist that he did. The question of exact personal action cannot be recovered fully, but the story he told required him to stand at the center. Whether he literally charged 6 times as described, or whether the reality was a more collective rally around the royal guard and arriving support, the remembered moment tells us what Egyptians needed their king to be: the one who did not dissolve when the army did. The poem of Kadesh is not modest. It presents Ramesses speaking almost alone with Ammonius, abandoned by men, supported by God. He reminds Ammonius that he has not neglected temples, that he has filled sanctuaries with offerings, that he is more loyal than any foreigner could be. This prayer is dramatic because it is not humble in the way a later religious tradition might expect humility. It is intimate, forceful, and contractual. The king has served the god. Now the god must show that service matters. Ammonius' answer gives the scene its sacred power. The god says, in effect, that he is with Ramesses, that his hand is worth more than hundreds of thousands, that divine support outweighs human numbers. This makes Kadesh more than military memory. It becomes proof of the relationship between God and king. The king's isolation becomes the stage on which divine loyalty appears. This is why Ramesses could turn stalemate into triumph. He shifted the meaning of victory. He did not need to prove that Egypt captured Kadesh if he could prove that Ammonius saved him and that his courage prevented catastrophe. In temple language, that was victory enough. Modern military analysis and ancient royal theology are asking different questions. The modern question is, who controlled the territory afterward? The ancient royal question is, who displayed divine favor under crisis? Both questions matter. Kadesh remained outside Egyptian control. The Hittites did not collapse. Muwatalli did not lose his empire. Ramesses withdrew. In strategic terms, the battle was at best inconclusive for Egypt and arguably more favorable to the Hittites, because they kept the contested city. Yet Ramesses returned home and announced triumph. He had the battle carved on temple walls again and again, at Karnak, Luxor, Abydos, Abu Simbel, the Ramesseum. He had poems and bulletins proclaim his valor. He turned a near disaster into a permanent royal image. This is one of the reasons Ramesses is so fascinating. A lesser king might have hidden the danger. Ramesses transformed it. He did not simply say, "I won." He said, "I was alone, surrounded, betrayed by cowards, and I saved Egypt because Ammonius loved me." The danger became evidence. The worse the crisis looked, the greater the king became for surviving it. Ancient kings did not write history in the modern sense. They wrote power. Their inscriptions did not exist to give balanced battlefield reporting to future scholars. They existed to display the king's relationship with the gods and the world. Ramesses's Kadesh inscriptions tell us less about what every unit did and more about what Ramesses wanted Egypt to understand. The pharaoh was the point at which divine favor entered battle. The Hittites had their own view. Their records do not confirm an Egyptian conquest. The political reality after Kadesh suggests stalemate, not decisive Egyptian victory. But stalemate can be humiliating for a king who needs triumph. So Ramesses made triumph in stone. And because stone lasts, his version became the louder one for thousands of years. Still, the long-term outcome was not endless war. About 16 years after Kadesh, in the 21st year of Ramesses's reign, Egypt and Hatti made peace. By then Muwatalli II was dead. The Hittite throne had passed through political turbulence, and Hattusili III, who had taken power after conflict within the royal family, needed international legitimacy. Ramesses also had reasons to stabilize the northern frontier. Both powers faced other pressures. The result was the Egyptian-Hittite Treaty, one of the most famous diplomatic documents from the ancient world. It survives in both Egyptian and Hittite traditions. Egyptian hieroglyphic versions carved at Karnak and the Ramesseum, and Hittite versions from Hattusa, preserved in cuneiform on clay tablets in Akkadian, the diplomatic language of the age. The treaty promises peace and brotherhood, mutual support, extradition of fugitives, and oaths before the gods of both lands. It does not read like sentimental reconciliation. It reads like the agreement of two great powers that understood the cost of continuing conflict and the usefulness of stability. A modern replica of the treaty is displayed at the United Nations, where it is treated as an ancestor of international diplomacy. That symbolic use is not accidental. The treaty reminds us that the Bronze Age world was not primitive in its politics. Great kings negotiated, corresponded, exchanged gifts, made oaths, manipulated public language, and balanced military pride against diplomatic necessity. Ramesses was not only a warrior. He was a diplomat who knew when peace could serve power better than another campaign. The treaty was followed by deeper relations between the two courts. Years later, Ramesses married a Hittite princess, a diplomatic marriage that turned former enemies into kin in the language of kingship. Egyptian inscriptions present the event with royal confidence. Foreign lands recognize Egypt's greatness and send their daughters to the pharaoh. Behind the triumphal language lay practical diplomacy. The world of Ramesses was one in which marriage could become foreign policy. Women of royal houses could carry alliances in their bodies, and peace could be made visible through ceremony. The treaty that followed years later also has emotional depth if we resist treating it as a footnote. After all the carved fury of Kadesh, after all the images of Hittites crushed beneath royal horses, Egypt made peace with Hittite. Royal propaganda could proclaim eternal victory, but diplomacy acknowledged reality. Neither empire could easily erase the other. Both needed stability more than another cycle of costly campaigns. The treaty also shows how the gods of both lands could be enlisted in international law. Oaths were not merely legal language. They invoked divine witnesses who would punish violation. The Egyptian version and Hittite version differ in presentation, but both understand that peace requires more than words. It requires sacred enforcement, public memory, and mutual recognition. Ramesses, who had once carved the Hittites as defeated enemies, now addressed their king as a partner in peace. This does not make him inconsistent. It makes him a ruler. War and peace are both tools of kingship. The later diplomatic marriage with a Hittite princess shows the same flexibility. Egyptian royal ideology traditionally resisted the idea of Egyptian princesses marrying foreign rulers, because Egypt did not give royal daughters outward in the same way it received women from abroad. To receive a foreign princess, however, could be framed as tribute, alliance, and acknowledgement of Egyptian supremacy. The bride's journey from Hittite to Egypt was therefore both personal and political. A woman crossed the space where armies had fought, and her body became part of the architecture of peace. The sources preserve her through the lens of royal diplomacy, not through her own voice. We do not know how she felt leaving her homeland for Ramesses's court. She may have been honored, frightened, resigned, proud, lonely, or all of these at once. Diplomatic marriages often appear in inscriptions as triumphs of kings. For the women who lived them, they were also permanent displacement. With the northern frontier stabilized, Ramesses could turn even more fully toward building. To modernize, his building program can look like ego carved in stone. That is partly true. Ramesses wanted his name everywhere. He had no modest relationship with memory. But Egyptian temple building was not only vanity. A temple was the house of a god. It was where the god's statue was awakened, washed, dressed, fed with offerings, praised, hidden, revealed, and maintained. The daily ritual of the temple was not theater in the weak sense. Egyptians believed it helped sustain cosmic order. To build for the gods was to keep the world alive. The pharaoh was the one human being, in principle, who could properly serve the gods on behalf of Egypt. In practice, priests performed the daily rituals, but they did so as representatives of the king. Every temple scene showing Ramesses offering incense, wine, flowers, bread, ma'at, or captives to a god reinforced the same structure. The king nourishes the divine order, and the gods grant life, stability, dominion, and millions of years in return. The walls are filled with exchange. The king gives. The gods give back. Ramesses made this exchange enormous. At Abu Simbel, in Nubia, he carved mountain into kingship. The Great Temple stands as one of the most overwhelming monuments ever made by an Egyptian ruler. Four-seated colossi of Ramesses rise from the facade, about 20 meters tall, facing outward with calm, almost impossible confidence. Between their legs and around their bases stand smaller figures of family members, captives, and symbols of rule, but the dominant image is the king multiplied into landscape. He does not merely stand before the mountain. He becomes part of it. The temple penetrates deep into the rock. Its interior moves from public grandeur towards sacred darkness. Colossal standing figures line the hall. Reliefs celebrate the king's victories, including Kadesh. Far inside, at the sanctuary, sit the gods and the deified king, Ra Horikti, Ammonius Ra, Ta, and Ramesses himself. Twice a year, sunlight enters the temple and reaches the inner sanctuary, illuminating most of the seated figures, while Ta, associated with the underworld, remains in darkness. The dates are often connected in popular tradition with Ramesses's birthday and coronation, though that exact identification should be treated cautiously. What matters is certain. The temple was designed to make light itself participate in royal theology. In the 20th century, when the Aswan High Dam threatened to drown Abu Simbel beneath Lake Nasser, the temples were cut apart and moved to higher ground in one of the great archaeological rescue operations of modern times. The relocation preserved the monument, but also made visible something Ramesses himself would have understood. Great stone survives because later people decide it must survive. Memory requires maintenance. This matters when imagining Abu Simbel as well. Today it is approached as a monument. In Ramesses's world, it was a place where divine and royal presence were maintained. The colossi impressed humans outside. The ritual life inside addressed gods. The temple's power came from both. The relocation of Abu Simbel in the 20th century adds a modern layer to this ancient sacred machine. Engineers cut the temple into blocks and reassembled it above the waterline. The act saved the monument, but separated it from its original cliff. The alignment of the sun was preserved as closely as possible, though shifted slightly by modern reconstruction and calendrical realities. This does not ruin the monument. It adds another chapter. Ramesses carved himself into a mountain, and modern humanity moved the mountain to preserve him. Few ancient rulers have received such service from the future. Nearby stands the smaller temple dedicated to Nefertari and Hathor. It is smaller only because the Great Temple is colossal. In any other setting, Nefertari's temple would be astonishing enough by itself. On its facade, Ramesses and Nefertari appear at nearly equal scale, an unusual honor in Egyptian royal art. Queens were often shown smaller than kings. Here the queen stands with a visual dignity that makes her importance unmistakable. Nefertari was Ramesses's great royal wife, and he presented her with language of exceptional affection. Her name means something like beautiful companion. Her tomb in the Valley of the Queens, QV 66, is among the most beautiful painted spaces from ancient Egypt. In it, Nefertari moves through the afterlife with grace, dressed in white, guided by gods, surrounded by color that still seems alive after millennia. The tomb is not simply a love letter, but it is difficult not to feel the personal force of the honor given to her. We should be careful. Royal marriages were political institutions. Affection in inscriptions is shaped by convention, ideology, and public display. Ramesses had other wives and many children. Nefertari's prominence does not mean his domestic life resembled a modern romantic ideal. Yet the monuments do show that she occupied a special place in his reign. At Abu Simbel and in her tomb, she became part of his eternity. Ramesses's other major queen, Isetnofret, also mattered greatly, though she is less visually famous. She was the mother of important royal children, including Marinta, the son who eventually inherited the throne. The imbalance in modern attention between Nefertari and Isetnofret reminds us that survival shapes emotion. The most beautiful tomb and the most dramatic temple facade keep Nefertari close to us. Other women of the court, no less real in their own time, stand further back because the record preserves them less vividly. Ramesses fathered an extraordinary number of children. Ancient Egyptian royal families were large by design. Sons and daughters could serve dynastic, religious, administrative, and diplomatic functions. But Ramesses's family was vast even by royal standards. Reliefs and inscriptions list many sons and daughters. Some estimates count more than 100 children. The exact number is uncertain because the evidence is fragmentary and names can be repeated, omitted, or difficult to place, but the scale is beyond doubt. At first, this seemed like strength. Many sons meant many possible heirs, many royal bodies through which the dynasty could continue. But long life turned abundance into a strange kind of vulnerability. Ramesses outlived his eldest sons. Then he outlived more. Princes who had once seemed destined for the throne died, while their father remained. By the time Marinta finally became king, he was not a young man rising after a normal succession. He was an older son inheriting from a father who had made the idea of any other king feel almost unnatural. There is something deeply human in this. Ramesses's monuments make him appear timeless, but his family life unfolded under the same law of mortality that governed everyone else. Sons died. Wives died. Officials died. Soldiers who had marched with him at Kadesh aged and vanished. Priests who had served his early temples were replaced by sons and grandsons. The king remained, but remaining is not the same as being untouched. Longevity can become another form of loss. This is a recurring truth in Ramesses's world. The public record is loudest where the king is concerned. Many other lives must be reconstructed from edges. Nefertari is unusually visible because Ramesses made her visible. Her temple at Abu Simbel and her tomb tell us not simply that she existed, but that her image mattered to royal presentation. At the small temple, Hathor's presence links queen, love, music, fertility, and divine femininity. Nefertari does not stand there as a private wife remembered only by a grieving husband. She stands as part of a sacred royal system in which queenship helps mediate divine power. In her tomb, the afterlife journey is painted with such care that it becomes one of the great achievements of Egyptian visual culture. The colors are not only decorative. They belong to a world where images could help the dead move safely among gods. Nefertari plays Senate, offers to deities, is led by Isis, welcomed by Hathor, and transformed through ritual knowledge. The tomb is intimate because it is for one woman, but cosmic because the fate of the dead required passage through divine order. Ramesses's many children created another kind of royal display. At Abu Simbel and elsewhere, rows of princes and princesses appear smaller than the king, but still part of the image of abundance. Fertility mattered for kingship. A pharaoh with many children displayed dynastic strength. Sons could command, serve as priests, appear in processions, and reinforce succession. Daughters could hold important religious or courtly roles. But the more numerous the children, the more complex the internal hierarchy became. The office of crown prince shifted as older sons died. Amun-Herkhab-Shef, Kamwasit, and others appear prominently at different points. Kamwasit, in particular, is one of the most intriguing sons of Ramesses. Serving as high priest of Ptah at Memphis, he became famous for restoring ancient monuments and has sometimes been called the first Egyptologist because of his attention to old royal sites. That phrase is modern and imperfect, but the impulse is striking. In Ramesses's own family, someone was already looking backward at Egypt's deep past and preserving names from 1,000 years before. Kamwasit's restorations show that ancient Egyptians themselves lived among antiquities. To them, the pyramids were already ancient. Old Kingdom kings belonged to a remote sacred past. The past did not begin with modern archaeology. Egyptians had their own forms of historical reverence, shaped by cult, legitimacy, and the power of names. Ramesses built for the future. His son restored the past. Together they show an Egypt intensely aware of time. The fact that Kamwasit died before inheriting the throne is part of the tragedy of Ramesses's longevity. The sons who might have become kings became ancestors instead. Marinta, the eventual heir, had to wait through the deaths of older brothers. In another reign, he might never have ruled. Under Ramesses, survival became succession. Marinta inherited not only a throne, but a shadow. No successor could easily follow Ramesses II. The monuments were too many. The name was too large. The reign was too long. A king after Ramesses had to rule in a world filled with Ramesses. This is one of the hidden costs of overwhelming greatness. It leaves little room for those who come next. The Ramesseum, his mortuary temple on the west bank at Thebes, was built for the cult of the king after death. It stood among other temples of millions of years, monuments designed not simply as tomb chapels, but as enduring ritual institutions. There, priests would offer to the deified king and maintain his memory as part of the sacred landscape of Western Thebes. The Ramesseum once contained a colossal seated statue of Ramesses, now fallen and broken into massive fragments. The ruined colossus later helped inspire the Greek name Ozymandias, known to the modern world through Shelley's poem about the collapse of worldly pride. The irony is famous. A king who wanted permanence became a poem about impermanence. But the irony is not complete. Ramesses did survive, not as he intended, not with every monument intact, not with the exact obedience of later generations, but unmistakably. His name is still spoken. His face is still recognized. His temples still shape the journey of travelers along the Nile. Shelley's broken statue says power passes. Abu Simbel says power can also leave traces so large that even ruin becomes a form of victory. At Karnak, Ramesses added to the greatest temple complex in Egypt, a place already layered with centuries of royal devotion to Ammonius. He completed and decorated works begun before him, including parts associated with the great hypostyle hall, that forest of immense columns whose scale still overwhelms the body. At Luxor Temple, he added a massive pylon, colossal statues, courts, and obelisks. One of the Luxor obelisks still stands in Egypt. The other now stands in the Place de la Concorde in Paris, removed in the 19th century, part of the long and uneasy afterlife of Egyptian monuments in European capitals. Ramesses also usurped monuments. He carved his name over earlier kings' names, claimed works he had not begun, and inserted himself into older sacred landscapes. Modern observers often find this dishonest, and in one sense it was. But ancient Egyptian kingship had a different relationship to memory and identity. To place one's name on a monument was not merely to sign it like an artist. It was to activate presence. A name had life. A cartouche could make the king ritually present wherever it was read, seen, or invoked. Ramesses still did this more aggressively than most. His appetite for inscription was enormous. He understood, or sensed, that stone favors repetition. One monument may fall, 10 may be damaged, 100 may lose paint. But if the name is everywhere, erasure becomes difficult. The result is that Ramesses sometimes seems even greater archaeologically because he made sure he was hard to miss. The workers who made this possible were not faceless. At Deir el-Medina, the village of royal tomb workers near Thebes, the dry desert preserved an intimate archive of daily life. Letters, legal disputes, work records, love songs, wills, prayers, complaints, and accounts. The village existed before and after Ramesses II, and much of its most famous evidence belongs to the Ramesside period broadly rather than to his reign alone. The famous first recorded strike occurred later, under Ramesses II, when workers protested delayed rations. It should not be placed under Ramesses II, but the community itself helps us understand the world that built royal eternity. The artisans of Deir el-Medina were skilled, literate, or connected to literacy, proud of their work, and closely tied to the state. They cut and decorated royal tombs in the Valley of the Kings, spaces meant to protect pharaohs in the afterlife. They also argued with neighbors, borrowed goods, made offerings to local gods, worried about payments, and wrote to dead relatives for help. Their lives remind us that royal immortality rested on wages, rations, skill, and ordinary frustration. A pharaoh's tomb or temple looks effortless when finished. The stone seems to have always belonged where it stands. But every surface required bodies: quarrymen striking stone in heat, boatmen moving blocks on the Nile, scribes measuring deliveries, overseers shouting, painters grinding pigments, sculptors correcting lines, carpenters making scaffolds, priests approving iconography, cooks feeding crews, families waiting for workers to return. The king's image may dominate the wall, but thousands of lives stand behind each carved line. That scale of building was possible only because the Egyptian state still knew how to gather resources, organize labor, and turn royal command into stone. The movement of stone was itself a miracle of organization. Quarries at Aswan, Gebel el-Silsila, and other places supplied granite and sandstone. Blocks had to be cut with tools, separated from bedrock, dragged, loaded onto barges, floated along the Nile when water allowed, unloaded, hauled, raised, and finished. Obelisks required even more extreme precision. To stand an obelisk was to make a single piece of stone defy the difficulty of its own weight. Egyptians had centuries of experience, but experience did not make the task easy. It made the impossible repeatable. Ramesses's monuments therefore testify not only to royal will, but to institutional memory. The state remembered how to build. Craftsmen inherited techniques from fathers, masters, workshops, and schools. Scribes knew formulas. Overseers knew how many men and animals a task required. Priests knew which scenes belonged where. Artists knew proportions for royal bodies. Stonecutters knew how deep a cartouche should be carved so that time and rivals would struggle to erase it. A monument is knowledge made visible. Ramesses's military life did not end at Kadesh, though Kadesh became the story he preferred to repeat. He campaigned in the Levant in later years and maintained Egypt's position through a mixture of force, treaty, and display. In Nubia, Egypt's southern imperial zone, his temples served both devotion and domination. Nubia supplied gold, labor, cattle, soldiers, and strategic depth. Egyptian kings had long treated Nubia as essential to royal wealth and divine kingship, and Ramesses continued that tradition with particular grandeur. Abu Simbel, seen from this angle, was not simply a temple to impress later tourists. It was placed in Nubia, facing a landscape where Egyptian power needed to be seen. The colossal king told local populations, travelers, officials, soldiers, and gods that Egypt ruled here. The temple spoke in stone what empire always tries to say: this order is permanent. But no order is permanent. In the later decades of Ramesses's life, the Eastern Mediterranean world began to show signs of strain. Some groups later associated with the Sea Peoples appear already in Egyptian military records, including the Sherdin, whom Ramesses fought early and then incorporated into his own forces. The great wave of destruction connected with the Sea Peoples belongs more clearly to the time after him, especially under Marenta and Ramesses II. It would be misleading to make Ramesses II the main pharaoh of that crisis. Yet he lived near the edge of it. The world he inhabited was not as stable as his monuments pretended. The late Bronze Age international system linked Egypt, Hittite, Babylonia, Assyria, Cyprus, the Levantine cities, Mycenaean Greece, and smaller powers through diplomacy, marriage, trade, and war. Kings called each other brothers when status allowed. They exchanged gifts, doctors, princesses, statues, requests, complaints, and carefully worded insults. The Amarna letters, though earlier than Ramesses II and belonging to the age before his dynasty, reveal this diplomatic world with extraordinary clarity. By Ramesses's time, the same broad habits of great power correspondence and vassal management still mattered, though the specific archive is not his. This international world depended on fragile things: harvests, bronze supply, palace economies, royal legitimacy, shipping, tribute, and the ability of states to manage local unrest. Over time, earthquakes, droughts, migrations, rebellions, internal weakness, and war all contributed to the collapse or transformation of many Bronze Age states. Egypt survived longer than some, but it too changed. Ramesses's reign, therefore, stands not only as a peak, but as a last great glare before the light began to alter. To Egyptians living under him, however, the future collapse of systems was invisible. What they saw was the king who endured. They saw his cartouche on temple walls. They saw statues of him in courtyards. They heard his names in ritual. They saw festivals, offerings, processions, scribes, soldiers, officials. They saw foreign captives carved beneath his feet and gods granting him life. They saw the old grammar of pharaonic power repeated so often that repetition itself became reassurance. The Egyptian word and concept of Ma'at is essential here. Ma'at was truth, order, justice, balance, rightness, cosmic harmony. It was not abstract ethics alone. It was the condition that allowed the sun to rise, the Nile to flood, courts to judge, offerings to reach gods, families to continue, and enemies to be held at the borders. The pharaoh's role was to uphold Ma'at and defeat Isfit, disorder. Ramesses's art constantly shows this. He smites enemies, offers Ma'at to the gods, receives life and dominion. The message is simple because it needed to be repeated everywhere. The king holds the world in order. The reality was more complicated. No king held the world alone. But sacred kingship works through concentrated symbols. The pharaoh becomes the place where the labor of the state, the cycle of ritual, the force of the army, and the favor of the gods meet in one body. Ramesses made that body colossal. The ordinary population also lived in that shadow. For farmers along the Nile, royal ideology may have felt distant in daily labor, but it still shaped taxes, festivals, conscription, local temple life, and the calendar of public ritual. A man might never see Abu Simbel, but he might see a local statue or hear the king's names in offerings. A woman might never care about Kadesh in military detail, but the stability or instability of the state affected grain, safety, and family life. The king's image was remote and practical at once. Egyptian religion made the practical sacred. If the Nile flood was good, if the harvest succeeded, if enemies stayed away, if disease did not strike too harshly, if local disputes were resolved, then Ma'at seemed intact. The king received credit because ideology placed him at the center of order. If things went wrong, the system had ways to absorb trouble without immediately blaming the king, but prolonged disorder could become theologically dangerous. Ramesses's long reign benefited from the appearance of continuity. Continuity itself was a political resource. The festivals of Egypt helped make that continuity visible. Processions carried divine statues from sanctuaries. Barks moved through temple courts and along river routes. People gathered, watched, prayed, ate, drank, and received glimpses of sacred presence. During festivals such as the Opet festival at Thebes, the movement of Ammonius from Karnak to Luxor renewed connections between God, king, and land. Ramesses's additions to Luxor temple participated in this living ritual geography. A temple was not a ruin in his time. It was painted, noisy, fragrant, restricted, and active. Walls that now appear stone-colored were once bright with blue, red, yellow, green, black, and white. Incense burned. Offerings accumulated. Priests shaved, purified themselves, recited formulas, opened shrines, and handled divine images hidden from most eyes. Common people might never enter the deepest sanctuary, but the temple's presence shaped the city around it. Ramesses built not museum pieces, but functioning sacred machines. His connection with the gods was central to all of this. Ramesses was not a secular ruler using religion as decoration. In Egyptian ideology, kingship and religion were inseparable. A temple relief of Ramesses offering to Ammonius was not simply an advertisement. It was an image of cosmic maintenance. The king's legitimacy depended on divine favor, and divine favor was displayed through victory, fertility, construction, ritual correctness, and the defeat of enemies. Ammonius, whose cult had regained centrality after the Amarna period, was especially important. Ramesses's Kadesh prayer to Ammonius is a masterpiece of royal theology. The king reminds the god that he has built temples and filled them with offerings, that he has done more for Ammonius than any foreign enemy ever could. In return, he expects help. This is not the prayer of a helpless private person. It is the prayer of a king negotiating within a sacred economy of loyalty and reward. Ramesses speaks to Ammonius almost as a loyal servant demanding that the master honor their bond. Ra, Ta, Seth, Hathor, Osiris, and many other gods also appear through his monuments. Ramesses did not belong to one god alone. Egyptian religion was layered, regional, fluid, and old. The pharaoh had to stand before many divine powers, each with temples, priesthoods, myths, and local identities. His building across Egypt helped bind these powers to his name. Every temple was local and national at once. In Nubia, the deification of Ramesses reached a particularly visible form. At Abu Simbel, he sits among gods in the sanctuary. The king is not merely favored by divinity. He is drawn into its presence. Egyptian kings had long possessed divine aspects, but Ramesses's presentation of himself was unusually emphatic. His image says, "The king who maintains the gods becomes godlike through the maintenance." This is not vanity alone. It is a political theology of empire. If conquered or controlled territories see the pharaoh as divine, rebellion becomes not merely political disobedience, but cosmic disorder. The temple communicates to the gods and to people simultaneously. It blesses and intimidates. The intimidation is part of the beauty. Egyptian art can be serene and violent in the same wall. A king offers flowers in one scene and smites bound captives in another. To modernize this can feel contradictory. To Egyptian ideology, it was coherent. Order includes tenderness toward gods and violence against chaos. The enemy is not simply a person, he is a symbol of disorder. When Ramesses crushes enemies on a temple wall, the image says Egypt is safe because disorder is kept beneath the king's feet. But enemies were real people. Hittite soldiers, Libyans, Nubians, Shurdin, Canaanites, and others did not exist only as symbols. They had families, gods, languages, fears, and ambitions. Ramesses's reliefs turn them into visual proof of his power, but history can return some humanity to them. Doing so does not weaken the story. It deepens it. Every empire describes its enemies in ways that serve itself. The historian's task is to see the art and the person at once. The same is true of the workers. Ramesses's monuments invite us to admire the king. They should also make us wonder about the thousands who made admiration possible. Some were skilled and proud. Some were conscripted. Some were paid in rations. Some may have experienced royal building as opportunity, others as burden. State labor in ancient Egypt cannot be reduced to one modern category. It included corvée obligations, specialized crews, seasonal labor, and professional artisans. The pyramids had been built long before Ramesses. New kingdom temples and tombs drew on different systems. But the principle remained. Royal eternity required organized labor. This labor was not always invisible to Egyptians themselves. Scribes praised the scribal profession by contrasting it with the hardship of manual labor. Texts describe the misery of the soldier, the farmer, the washerman, the potter, the cobbler, and other workers in ways that may be exaggerated for teaching, but they reveal awareness of toil. The educated class knew that bodies paid for state grandeur. They simply believed the order sustained by that grandeur was worth the cost. Ramesses's reign also gave later Egyptians a model. Many later pharaohs bore the name Ramesses. Ramesses II, who ruled in the 20th dynasty, consciously looked back to Ramesses II, adopted elements of his titulary and style, and fought his own great battles against Libyans and sea peoples. The name had become a political inheritance. To call oneself Ramesses was to summon memory of the great king, even when circumstances had changed. The vizierate was especially important. Egypt was too large and too administratively complex for a king to manage every matter personally. Viziers oversaw justice, taxation, labor, correspondence, and state order. They acted in the king's name, but they also mediated between royal command and local reality. A good vizier made kingship function. A bad or weak one could allow corruption, delay, resentment, or disorder to spread. The old Egyptian ideal of wise administration mattered because sacred kingship still needed paperwork. That contrast is one of the most fascinating things about Egypt. The divine king depended on bureaucracy. The sun god's son needed scribes counting grain. Colossal temples needed delivery receipts. Royal tombs needed attendance records. A treaty between God's beloved kings needed copies, seals, translations, and archives. Eternity ran on administration. The scribes who maintained this world had their own pride. Egyptian instructional texts often present the scribal profession as superior to manual labor, safer than soldiering, cleaner than craft, more secure than farming. This self-praise tells us something about class and aspiration. To write was to enter the machinery of power. A scribe could make things visible to the state: land, people, offerings, rations, debts, crimes, and commands. What was recorded could be remembered, taxed, punished, rewarded, or made sacred. Ramesses's fame therefore passed through scribal hands as much as through stonecutters' tools. Someone composed the Kadesh poem. Someone drafted royal letters. Someone copied temple accounts. Someone wrote names of princes and daughters. Someone recorded supplies for work crews. The king's voice that comes down to us is often a constructed voice made by trained professionals serving royal ideology. Even the phrase of the pharaoh is a product of a court. The court itself was a world of competition. Royal favor mattered. Access mattered. Titles mattered. A man close to the king could rise high. A family tied to temple, military, or administrative office could build power across generations. Priests of Ammonius had influence. Military men mattered in a dynasty with roots in the army. Royal sons held posts. Marriage alliances within the elite reinforced status. Behind the calm faces on walls was a political world in which everyone understood proximity to the king as a source of life. Ramesses's longevity probably intensified this. A long reign creates stability, but it can also freeze ambition. Officials may serve for decades under the same king. Younger men wait. Princes wait. Families plan around a ruler who does not die. The usual rhythm of succession slows. The court becomes accustomed to one authority, one style, one royal memory. When such a king finally dies, transition is not only ceremonial, it is psychological. This is why the end of Ramesses's reign must have felt heavy even before it arrived. The question was not simply who would inherit. It was whether Egypt could imagine itself without him. The answer was yes, because institutions outlived individuals. But the emotional shock may still have been profound. A king who rules nearly 7 decades makes his own mortality feel like a threat to the natural order. The succession to Merinta shows both continuity and strain. Merinta inherited a functioning state, but one facing pressures. His victory stele would later become famous because of its reference to Israel, a small line within a triumphal inscription that has become enormously important for modern history. The fact that this reference appears so soon after Ramesses reminds us that the world beyond Egypt was changing in ways Ramesses's own monuments could not fully contain. In Canaan and Syria, local realities were always more complex than imperial claims. Egyptian control varied by time and place. Some city-states were loyal, some reluctant, some opportunistic. Vassal rulers needed Egyptian support, but also maneuvered for their own survival. The great powers could demand obedience, but distance gave local actors room. This was true under Akhenaten, under Seti, under Ramesses, and afterward. Empire is never as smooth on the ground as it looks in royal inscriptions. Nubia, too, was more than a conquered backdrop. Egyptian rule there had deep roots by Ramesses's time, but Nubian culture did not disappear. Egyptian temples, forts, administrators, and artistic forms interacted with local populations in complex ways. Some Nubians served Egypt. Some were incorporated into Egyptian systems. Egyptian gods were worshipped in Nubian landscapes, and local identities persisted beneath imperial language. Abu Simbel's grandeur must be read in this context. It is both sacred devotion and imperial messaging. The western frontier, with Libyan groups pressing toward Egypt, also mattered. Ramesses fought Libyans and incorporated some foreign warriors into Egyptian service. The boundaries of Egypt were not walls sealing the land from outsiders. They were zones of conflict, settlement, service, exchange, and anxiety. Egypt depended on foreigners even as royal ideology depicted foreignness as chaos to be subdued. Shirred-in warriors, for example, could appear first as enemies and later as troops in Egyptian armies. The enemy could become an instrument of the king. This flexibility is one reason Egypt endured. It could absorb. It could use foreign labor, foreign soldiers, foreign wives, foreign gods in certain contexts, foreign goods, and foreign styles, while still presenting itself as the center of order. Ramesses's Egypt was proud of its identity, but not isolated. Its greatness came partly from managing contact without admitting dependency too openly. The late Bronze Age world was full of such managed contact. Tin for bronze had to move across long distances. Luxury goods circulated between courts. Diplomatic gifts displayed status. Marriage alliances linked houses. Messengers carried tablets and letters across dangerous roads. A king's prestige depended not only on what he controlled at home, but on how other kings addressed him. Great kings wanted to be recognized by other great kings as brothers, not inferiors. The language of equality mattered. Ramesses's treaty with Hattusili III belongs to this world of brotherhood between rivals. Peace was not weakness if it was framed as agreement between equals under divine witness. In fact, peace could confirm status. Only a great king could make peace with another great king in language worthy of gods. Small rulers submitted. Great rulers negotiated. The treaty's survival gives Ramesses a different kind of legacy from the temples. Temples speak of divine kingship. The treaty speaks of international order. Together, they show two faces of power, one turned inward toward gods and subjects, the other outward toward rival states. Ramesses needed both. He also needed queens, sons, and daughters to embody dynasty. Royal women appear less often than men in narratives of war and building, but queenship was not decorative. A great royal wife could participate in ritual, diplomacy, and succession. The queen's body helped produce heirs. Her image helped express harmony, fertility, and divine favor. Nefertari's prominence at Abu Simbel and in her tomb is therefore not an exception to ideology, but an elevated use of it. Royal daughters, too, could hold religious significance. Some daughters of Ramesses appear in monuments, and several became great royal wives in the complex internal patterns of Egyptian royal marriage. Such marriages can be unsettling to modern readers, but within Egyptian royal ideology, they reinforced sacred bloodlines and dynastic continuity. The royal family was not a private household in the modern sense. It was an institution of cosmic and political reproduction. This does not mean the people inside it did not feel. They certainly did, but their feelings are mostly hidden behind titles, images, and formulaic language. When we sense warmth in the inscriptions for Nefertari, or sadness in the fact that Ramesses outlived so many sons, we are looking through narrow openings in a formal wall. History often works this way. The most emotional truths are visible only indirectly. His body, remarkably, still exists. Ramesses's mummy was found in the royal cache at Deir el-Bahri in 1881, where priests of a later period had hidden many royal mummies to protect them from tomb robbers. The discovery brought together kings who had once been buried separately in splendor but had later been gathered in secrecy. There, stripped of much of their original burial wealth, they survived as bodies. The mummy of Ramesses II shows an elderly man, tall for his time, with a strong face and a prominent nose that seems, in broad terms, to echo the profile visible in some royal images. Scientific study has found signs of age and illness, arthritis, dental problems, vascular disease, and the physical where one might expect in a man who lived into his 80s or 90s in the ancient world. This is one of the most moving contradictions in Egyptology. The temples show a king forever young, forever victorious, forever ideal. The mummy shows that the god-king had aching joints and bad teeth. In 1976, Ramesses's mummy was sent to France for conservation treatment. The event became famous because of the quasi-royal honors associated with his arrival. Stories have circulated about passports and state reception. Details are sometimes repeated more colorfully than the evidence warrants, but the symbolic fact remains powerful. Modern officials treated the ancient body not like an ordinary object, but like the remains of a sovereign. 3,000 years after death, Ramesses could still command ceremony. This afterlife of reputation is part of his story. Ramesses wanted his name to endure, and it did. But endurance changes meaning. In his own inscriptions, he is the victorious bull, beloved of Ammonius, the king who crushes Hittite, the ruler to whom foreign lands submit. In modern museums, he is also a subject of medical study, conservation, tourism, political symbolism, and ethical debate. His body is no longer simply his. It belongs to Egypt, to scholarship, to memory, and to the long human fascination with preserved power. Then there is the question that has followed him through popular imagination. Was Ramesses the pharaoh of the Exodus? The Bible does not name the pharaoh of the Exodus. The association with Ramesses II rests partly on the mention in Exodus of store cities called Pithom and Ramses, and partly on the fact that Ramesses II built Pi-Ramesses in the eastern delta using state labor. In film and popular culture, Ramesses became the natural candidate, proud, powerful, builder of cities, ruler of Egypt's grandeur, dramatic enough to stand opposite Moses. But historical caution is necessary. Egyptian records do not mention the biblical plagues, the mass enslavement and departure of Israelites as described in the Exodus narrative, or a catastrophe of the scale presented in the story. That does not settle every question about historical memory, migration, servitude, or the formation of Israelite identity, but it means the identification of Ramesses II as the Exodus pharaoh cannot be treated as established fact. Many scholars view the Exodus as a foundational tradition shaped by memory, theology, and later identity, rather than as a straightforward court chronicle of one datable event. Others continue to explore historical kernels in the tradition. The responsible approach is to keep Ramesses connected to the discussion without making him the confirmed villain of the story. This actually makes the subject more interesting. Ramesses is not diminished if he is not the pharaoh of Exodus. His documented life is already immense. The possible association shows how his image became large enough to absorb other stories. When later generations imagined the might of Egypt, Ramesses fit the role. He had built the city. He had carved the statues. He had left the face. He had made himself the pharaoh people could imagine when they needed Egypt to have one name. Ramesses' tomb, KV7 in the Valley of the Kings, did not preserve him as beautifully as his temples preserved his name. It suffered from flooding and damage. His mummy was not found there, but in the later royal cache, moved for protection. This contrast between tomb and temple is instructive. The place intended to house his body failed in one sense. The public monuments intended to proclaim his name succeeded more dramatically. Egyptian eternity required many safeguards because any single safeguard could fail. The Valley of the Kings itself was a landscape of hidden royal hope. Tombs cut deep into the limestone cliffs were meant to protect bodies and afterlife equipment from theft. Yet tomb robbery became persistent. Even royal burials were violated. Priests in later periods rewrapped and relocated mummies, gathering kings into caches. These acts were both practical and pious. Rescue through displacement. Ramesses survived because later Egyptians intervened when the original plan no longer worked. The mummy's rediscovery in 1881 was part of a dramatic modern story of local knowledge, antiquities trafficking, and official investigation. The royal cache at Deir el-Bahri contained an astonishing group of pharaohs, queens, and elites. For modern Egyptology, it was like opening a hidden chapter of ancient kingship. For Ramesses, it meant entering a new world of glass cases, labels, scientific imaging, and global fame. Scientific study can feel cold, but in the case of Ramesses, it also restores humanity. Arthritis tells us about pain. Dental disease tells us about suffering. Height tells us about physical presence. Hair and bone structure connect the mummy to the statues. The old king is no longer only an inscription. He becomes a patient across time. That patient, however, was once regarded as divine. The tension between reverence and analysis is unresolved. Modern museums and scholars must decide how to display human remains, especially royal remains, with dignity. Ancient Egyptians cared intensely about bodily integrity and the afterlife. To expose a mummy to public view can educate, but it also raises ethical questions. Ramesses' afterlife now includes debates he could never have imagined. The Exodus question belongs to another kind of afterlife, the afterlife of narrative. In popular imagination, Ramesses often stands opposite Moses because drama wants names. The Bible's Pharaoh is unnamed, which creates a vacuum. Ramesses fills it easily. He is grand enough, famous enough, and chronologically tempting enough. Pi-Ramesses gives the association a geographical hook. Film gives it a face. But history does not exist to satisfy dramatic neatness. The absence of Egyptian evidence for a mass exodus under Ramesses II cannot simply be waved away, especially given the scale of the biblical events. At the same time, absence of evidence in royal inscriptions is not surprising for events that would shame Egypt. Pharaohs did not normally record defeats or divine humiliations. The question therefore remains complex. There may be memories of Semitic-speaking laborers in Egypt, movements out of the Delta, frontier groups, and later theological shaping. But saying Ramesses was definitely the Exodus pharaoh goes beyond what evidence can bear. A careful treatment lets the association remain as part of reception history. Ramesses matters to Exodus tradition not because the identification is proven, but because later generations needed a pharaoh large enough for the role. His monuments made him available to imagination. The same mechanism operates in Ozymandias. Shelley did not need exact Egyptology to use Ramesses as a symbol. The broken colossus became a meditation on pride, empire, and ruin. The poem's power comes from contrast. A ruler commands future observers to look on his works in despair, but around the ruin is empty sand. For historians, the poem is not a factual biography. It is evidence of how Ramesses's image entered modern thought as the supreme example of power facing time. The poem is right and wrong. The works did not vanish entirely. The despair belongs less to the absence of monuments than to the gap between intention and control. Ramesses wanted future ages to understand him according to his own terms. They did not. They admired him, doubted him, studied him, moved him, mocked him, romanticized him, and corrected him. He survived, but not obediently. No one survives obediently. This is why Ramesses remains so powerful after 3,000 years. At the surface are battles, temples, statues, queens, treaties, mummies. Beneath them is the oldest human question: what can power do against time? Ramesses's answer was stone, name, ritual, image, and repetition. He used everything Egypt had learned over 2,000 years about survival. He used the gods, the Nile, the army, the quarry, the scribe, the sculptor, the priest, the queen, the sun, the enemy, the treaty, the corpse. He made all of them carry him forward. And they did. The question is not whether Ramesses was modest. He was not. The question is whether his self-magnification had enough truth inside it to endure. It did. Even after correction, even after the propaganda is stripped away, even after Kadesh is reduced from total victory to costly stalemate, even after the Exodus identification is left unproven, even after the usurpations are noted, Ramesses remains immense. The corrected Ramesses is more interesting than the legendary one. The legendary Ramesses always wins. The corrected Ramesses nearly loses, survives, boasts, negotiates, builds, ages, and leaves behind evidence that both supports and contradicts him. That is a better story because it contains the actual texture of power. Real rulers do not live inside pure triumph. They improvise, exaggerate, recover, and hope no one reads the enemy archive. Modern scholarship did read the enemy archive. Hittite tablets complicated the Egyptian wall. Archaeology relocated Pi-Ramesses. Medical study complicated the divine body. Biblical criticism complicated the Exodus pharaoh. Conservation moved Abu Simbel. Every modern discovery has made Ramesses less simple and more alive. A simple hero can only be admired. A complicated king can be understood. Understanding does not require affection. Ramesses could be ruthless. His monuments celebrate domination. His state extracted labor. His inscriptions humiliate enemies. His usurpations took memory from others. His official truth served power. But ancient kingship was not designed for gentleness. Judging him only by modern moral expectations risks missing the world in which he operated. Excusing everything because it was ancient risks turning history into worship. The stronger position is to see clearly. He was a product of his world and one of its most effective masters. His mastery lay not only in action, but in framing action. Kadesh becomes victory because he framed it. The treaty becomes eternal peace because both sides framed it. Abu Simbel becomes divine permanence because architecture framed sunlight. Nefertari becomes beloved beyond the usual queenly record because he framed her that way. His own old age becomes proof of divine favor because ideology framed longevity as blessing. Ramesses understood frames. Every civilization frames power. Egypt did it with stone and ritual. Modern states do it with cameras, monuments, museums, documents, ceremonies, and media. The forms change. The desire does not. Ramesses feels distant because of chariots and hieroglyphs, but familiar because he understood something still true. Power wants to be seen in the form that best protects it from doubt. His temples are arguments against doubt. They say the king is strong. The gods love him. Enemies fall. The land is ordered. The queen is radiant. The suns continue. The treaty proves greatness. The sun itself confirms the design. The name will last. Then time answers with cracks, fallen statues, lost cities, damaged tombs, missing bodies, and alternative archives. The conversation between Ramesses and time is still going on. A traveler at Luxor today may stand before his colossi without knowing the full Kadesh debate or the complexities of the Hittite treaty. The first response is physical. The statues are large. The name is old. The face is calm. Something in the human body responds to scale before interpretation begins. Ramesses knew that. He built for the body before he built for the scholar. A scholar later asks different questions. Which cartouche was recut? Which relief belongs to Seti and which to Ramesses? What does the Hittite version say? How reliable is the poem? What did the treaty omit? Where was Pi-Ramesses? What diseases show in the mummy? How does royal art balance ideal and portrait? Scholarship does not destroy awe. It gives awe structure. The best encounter with Ramesses holds both. The first silence before the Colossus and the later knowledge that the Colossus is an argument. A weaker king can be summarized. Ramesses resists summary. If we call him vain, we miss his competence. If we call him great, we risk swallowing his propaganda. If we call him a liar at Kadesh, we miss the ancient logic of royal truth. If we call him the Exodus pharaoh, we overstate the evidence. If we detach him from that tradition entirely, we miss how powerfully his name entered later imagination. He lives in the tension between fact and image. The Nile Valley helps explain why images mattered so much. Egyptian monuments are not scattered randomly. They follow river, desert edge, sacred sites, political centers, and routes of travel. A person moving through Egypt encountered kings in stone again and again. The land itself became a sequence of royal appearances. At the temple gate, the king. At the pylon, the king. In the courtyard, the king. On the obelisk, the king. In the sanctuary, the king before the god. In the mortuary temple, the king after death. The repetition created a world in which kingship felt natural because it was everywhere. Ramesses mastered this saturation. He did not rely on one masterpiece. He made memory cumulative. One might think that such a ruler would feel distant, but he becomes strangely close through details. The fallen colossus at the Ramesseum, too heavy to imagine moving easily. The red hair of the mummy, affected by age and preservation. The pain of dental abscesses. The names of sons who died before him. The poetic inscription for Nefertari. The prayer to Ammonius in crisis. The decision to claim victory over Kadesh. These details bring him down from abstraction without making him small. The story of Ramesses is therefore not only about power. It is about the human desire to outlast death. Egyptian culture was deeply concerned with survival after death. The body had to be preserved. The name had to be spoken. Offerings had to be made. Images could stand in for presence. Tombs and temples were technologies of eternity. Ramesses applied this civilization-wide concern at royal scale. He made more names, more images, more houses for gods, more places where his presence could continue. He turned the basic Egyptian hope for endurance into a national architecture of self. And yet, like every Egyptian, he died. His death did not end him, but it changed the form of his power. Priests carried his cult. Successors inherited his monuments and problems. Later rulers reused his stone. Tomb robbers threatened royal bodies. Priests moved mummies for safety. Sand-covered sites. Languages died. Scripts were forgotten. Greek and Roman travelers saw monuments they partly misunderstood. Medieval and early modern visitors left marks of their own. European collectors removed objects. Egyptologists deciphered hieroglyphs. Tourists arrived. Cameras arrived. The old king kept changing hands. The survival of Ramesses is not a straight line. It is a chain of rescue, theft, reverence, curiosity, nationalism, scholarship, and accident. When hieroglyphs could no longer be read, his inscriptions still had visual force, but their voice was muted. After Champollion and the decipherment of hieroglyphs in the 19th century, Ramesses began speaking again in a new way. His boasts could be read. His names could be identified. His usurpations could be detected. His official version of Kadesh could be compared with other evidence. Decipherment did not simply recover ancient Egypt. It put ancient Egypt on trial against its own words. Ramesses survived that trial better than many would. His claims were exaggerated, but not empty. His monuments were self-serving, but magnificent. His diplomacy was real. His reign was long. His building was vast. His name deserved its fame, though not always for the reasons his inscriptions give. One more element deserves attention: his title, the Great. Greatness in ancient history often comes from a mixture of scale, memory, and consequence. Ramesses's actual policies did not transform the world as radically as some rulers did. He did not found Egyptian civilization, create monotheism, build the pyramids, or conquer the largest empire Egypt ever held. Yet he became great because he ruled long, built massively, projected power brilliantly, and survived in memory more successfully than almost anyone. This is a different kind of historical greatness. It is not only greatness of innovation, it is greatness of presence. Ramesses is present in too many places to ignore. He is present in Nubia and Thebes, in treaties and poems, in biblical debates and museum halls, in tourist photographs and academic arguments. His reign became a surface onto which many later ages projected Egypt itself. That kind of presence can be more durable than any single policy. The old Egyptians might have understood this. To be remembered was not a small thing. A name spoken after death mattered. An offering made after death mattered. An image recognized after death mattered. If millions of people still speak the name Ramesses, even without offering bread and beer in the old way, something close to his desired survival has occurred. Not exactly as he imagined, but close enough to be unsettling. There is one more way to understand Ramesses: through the problem of truth. Ancient Egyptian royal truth was not the same as modern factual reporting. A temple wall did not aim to preserve every ambiguity of an event. It aimed to preserve the event's proper meaning within the order of the world. If the king fought chaos, then the wall showed chaos defeated. If the king returned from danger alive, the wall could show divine victory. If enemies still existed afterward, that did not necessarily break the image, because the image was not a newspaper. It was a ritual statement. This does not mean Egyptians were incapable of knowing what had happened. Soldiers knew whether a campaign had been difficult. Officials knew which cities had paid tribute and which had not. Foreign courts knew whether they had actually submitted. The Hittites certainly knew Ramesses had not taken Kadesh. But official royal art worked at another level. It translated unstable political events into stable cosmic form. Ramesses excelled at that translation. He took the chaos of battle and made it symmetrical. He took personal danger and made it divine favor. He took diplomatic compromise and made it eternal brotherhood. He took foreign marriage and made it proof of Egyptian prestige. He took a human body aging toward death and surrounded it with youthful images carved in stone. His whole reign can be read as an attempt to turn time's disorder into ordered surfaces. The surfaces are beautiful. That is part of their persuasive force. Egyptian artists did not need realism to create conviction. They used proportion, clarity, hierarchy, repetition, and sacred convention. The king is larger because he is more important. Enemies are bound because order must dominate chaos. Gods face the king because cosmic exchange is reciprocal. Hieroglyphs surround images because writing and image are not separate worlds, but partners in presence. To read an Egyptian wall is not only to decode language. It is to enter a system where sight, speech, ritual, and memory reinforce one another. In that system, Ramesses's deep-cut cartouches were more than signatures. They were anchors. A shallow inscription could be more easily erased. A deeply carved name held shadow. It caught light. It resisted chisels. It made the king harder to remove. The physical depth of the carving expressed the desired depth of memory. This is why usurpation was so tempting. If a monument already stood in a sacred place, already carried beauty and authority, adding one's name to it inserted a later king into an existing stream of power. Ramesses did this often. He was not alone in the practice, but he did it boldly. Some earlier kings lost visible credit because his name replaced theirs. Yet modern archaeology, by reading traces, recut surfaces, stylistic differences, and earlier layers, has restored some of what he tried to absorb. The stone remembers more than the usurper intended. The same is true of his image as a warrior. Ramesses wanted Kadesh to be remembered as his great personal triumph. It is remembered, but not as he fully intended. It is now remembered as one of the earliest battles whose propaganda can be compared across opposing traditions. His boast survived, but so did the tools to question it. This gives the story a strange justice. Ramesses won memory, but not full control over interpretation. Control was always incomplete, even in his lifetime. The Egyptian king appeared all-powerful in art, but he relied constantly on other people. Viziers, viceroys, generals, priests, royal women, scribes, artisans, foreign allies, interpreters, messengers, doctors, stable masters, quarry crews, ship captains, and local governors. The pharaoh was the center of the image, but the system was collective. If the system failed, the image could not feed people, move armies, or cut stone. Yet behind the image there was a human being moving through time. He was born into a court still healing from religious disruption. He was trained by Seti I. He took the throne young. He nearly lost control at Kadesh and made the crisis into legend. He negotiated peace. He loved, married, fathered, buried, built, prayed, commanded, aged, suffered pain, and died. The monuments flattened him into permanence, but his life was sequential. He had mornings before decisions, nights after bad news, years when children were born, days when messengers arrived, rituals he repeated, illnesses he endured. One way to see him clearly is to imagine him very old. By then his body had changed. The warrior of Kadesh, whether or not he had truly charged alone as the reliefs claimed, was gone. The king could still be represented as youthful, muscular, and perfect because royal art did not surrender to biology. But the man himself was aged. He had outlived comrades and sons. He had seen Nefertari vanish into the tomb he prepared for her. He had watched his own name multiply until it filled Egypt. He may have known, in the way old rulers know, that succession would soon become someone else's burden. For subjects, his age must have felt uncanny. A king who rules for a decade is a ruler. A king who rules for nearly 7 decades becomes an institution of nature. People may have dated memories by him. The reign becomes the frame of life itself. His death in 1213 BC was not only the death of a man. It was the end of the only political world most Egyptians knew. Marinta inherited the throne as an older man. He would rule in a different atmosphere. His reign is famous in part for the Merneptah stele, which contains the earliest widely accepted Egyptian reference to Israel. That fact belongs after Ramesses II, but it reminds us how close his world stood to later historical transformations. The Eastern Mediterranean was changing. Peoples and polities that had been peripheral in Egyptian imperial thought would become central to later histories. Ramesses's Egypt, for all its stone permanence, was not timeless. It was a moment. Its economy depended on agriculture, taxation, temple estates, foreign resources, and organized labor. Its ideology depended on gods whose temples required constant offerings. Its army depended on chariots, horses, archers, infantry, foreign auxiliaries, and supply lines. Its diplomacy depended on kings whose letters framed rivalry as brotherhood. Its art depended on conventions that made the king larger than life. Its memory depended on the survival of inscriptions in a land dry enough to preserve what other climates would erase. This is why Ramesses can feel both enormous and fragile. He built as if stone could defeat time. Stone did not defeat time, but it slowed time down. The temples suffered damage. Names were recut. Statues fell. Capitals changed. Pi-Ramesses itself declined after branches of the Nile shifted and the political landscape changed. Later kings moved monuments from the city to Tanis, where archaeologists first found many Ramesside objects out of their original context. For a long time, the true location of Pi-Ramesses was debated because Ramesses's stones had traveled after him. Even his capital became a puzzle. This is one of the strange ironies of archaeology. A king builds to fix memory in place, and later history moves the pieces. The name survives, but the place becomes uncertain. Then survey, excavation, magnetometry, pottery, foundations, and patient scholarly arguments slowly return the city to the map. Ramesses tried to control the future through inscriptions. The future answered through archaeology. The face of Ramesses is also more complicated than it appears. Egyptian royal art idealized. A pharaoh's body is not simply portraiture. It is a theological body, strong, symmetrical, young, controlled. Yet in Ramesses's case, the repetition of features across statues and the evidence of the mummy suggest a relationship between ideal and individual. The long nose, strong jaw, and distinctive profile were not entirely invented. The king's image was both symbol and person. That tension gives his statues their power. They are not photographs, but they are not empty masks. Standing before a colossal statue of Ramesses, one sees scale before detail. The body is too large to meet as a human body. That is the point. Colossal art changes the relationship between human body and ruler. It makes the king not someone to look at casually, but something under which a person stands. It turns politics into weather. The face is calm because the king does not need to hurry. The stone does not blink. The subject does. At Abu Simbel, this effect is multiplied by the landscape. The Nile, the cliff, the sun, the desert, and the seated figures create a theology of immensity. The king is not merely represented in nature. He has been cut into nature. The monument tells every passerby that Ramesses belongs to the order of mountains and sunrise. This is propaganda, yes. It is also art of staggering intelligence. The scenes of Kadesh inside such temples work similarly. They do not ask whether every detail happened exactly as carved. They pull the human eye into the royal world in which the king is always the decisive figure. Enemies are shown in confusion, often smaller, falling, drowning, pierced, or pleading. The king is composed. His horse's rear. His bow bends. His arm is never uncertain. The visual language does not record fear. It conquers fear by refusing to show it. But the historical Ramesses must have known fear at Kadesh. Courage without fear is only momentum. The story matters because the danger was real. If he had been invulnerable, there would be no drama. His propaganda needs the crisis because the crisis makes divine rescue visible. The man and the myth depend on each other. The Hittite king Muwatalli deserves more than the role of defeated enemy. He outmaneuvered Ramesses before the battle, using deception effectively. His army achieved surprise. His chariot force struck hard. He retained Kadesh. From a Hittite perspective, Ramesses did not win the campaign. The later treaty, made not with Muwatalli but with Hattusili III, belonged to a shifting Hittite political context after Muwatalli's death. Seeing the Hittites as capable opponents makes Ramesses more interesting, not less. A king who survives danger from a serious enemy is more compelling than one who defeats incompetence. The Hittite Empire itself would eventually collapse in the upheavals around the end of the Bronze Age. Its capital Hattusa was abandoned and destroyed. Its language, preserved on clay tablets, waited millennia to be read again. Egypt survived, but altered. The treaty between them, once a practical agreement, became a museum object and a diplomatic symbol. This is how history changes scale. What begins as policy becomes artifact. What begins as rivalry becomes heritage. Ramesses's reign also forces us to think about the relationship between achievement and self-promotion. He did exaggerate. He did claim what was not entirely his. He did carve himself larger than reality. But he also built, negotiated, ruled, and endured. It would be too easy to dismiss him as only a propagandist. Propaganda works best when it has something real to amplify. Ramesses gave his propaganda enough substance to survive scrutiny, though not enough to survive unchanged. A mature judgment can hold both truths. At Kadesh, he did not win the total victory he claimed, but he did avoid disaster and made that survival politically useful. In building, he did not create every monument bearing his name, but he did sponsor one of the most visible building programs in Egyptian history. In memory, he made himself larger than life, but his life was already unusually large. That is why his story works best when it is allowed to remain double. The monuments ask us to believe. The archives ask us to question. The mummy asks us to remember that every royal image once depended on breath, pain, hunger, age, and sleep itself. Near the end, perhaps the most powerful image is not the battle or the colossi, but the old king himself. That contrast contains the whole story. Ramesses the Great was both body and monument. The body aged. The monument did not. The body died. The monument insisted. The body was moved, examined, conserved. The monument still commands sunlight. The body tells us he was mortal. The monument tells us how hard he fought against that fact. Ancient Egypt understood this struggle better than almost any civilization. It did not deny death. It organized against it. Tombs, mummies, names, offerings, spells, statues, and temples were all answers to the same terror, that a person might disappear. Ramesses answered with overwhelming force. He made disappearance difficult. The great temple at Abu Simbel still catches light. The Ramesseum still carries fragments of his ambition. Luxor still bears his colossi. Karnak still holds his inscriptions. Nefertari's tomb still glows with impossible color. The treaty still speaks of peace after war. The mummy still bears the worn face of a man who ruled too long to be easily imagined. He was not Egypt's only great pharaoh. Khufu built the Great Pyramid. Hatshepsut ruled with extraordinary intelligence and built beautifully. Thutmose III created an empire. Amenhotep III presided over splendor. Akhenaten changed religion. Tutankhamun became famous through the accident of an intact tomb. But Ramesses II achieved something different. He became the pharaoh who looked most like what later ages expected a pharaoh to be. Warrior, builder, husband of a beloved queen, father of multitudes, maker of temples, carver of names, negotiator of peace, possible shadow behind biblical imagination, mummy, colossus, Ozymandias, great. The greatness is complicated. It should be. Simple greatness is usually propaganda. Complicated greatness is history. And Ramesses belongs to history because the stone he trusted still does what he asked it to do. It still makes us stop. It still makes us look upward. It still makes us say his name. The old king's body gives another indirect truth. His teeth, joints, and arteries tell us what monuments do not. A pharaoh could be shown eternally youthful, but age collected in bone. Dental abscesses may have caused real pain. Arthritis may have made movement difficult. In a world without modern pain relief, old age could be harsh even for the powerful. Palace comfort did not abolish biology. And yet Egyptian ideology did not require the actual body to remain perfect. Art supplied the ideal body. Ritual supplied renewal. The said festival, celebrated by kings to renew royal strength, expressed this desire to restore vitality. Ramesses celebrated multiple jubilees during his long reign, marking not only longevity, but repeated renewal of kingship. The aging man could be ritually rejuvenated, at least in the public and sacred order. The contrast between failing body and renewed kingship is central to his late reign. A jubilee was not merely an anniversary party. It was a ritual assertion that the king's power remained alive. Running, offering, enthronement, and divine approval all could be part of the festival language. For a long-lived king like Ramesses, repeated jubilees proclaimed that old age had not broken the bond between pharaoh and cosmos. The man might slow, but kingship was renewed. This brings us back to the most important theme. Ramesses's whole reign is a struggle between time and presentation. Time says the body ages, sons die, cities shift, enemies survive, treaties replace victories, monuments crack. Presentation says the king is young, sons stand in order, enemies fall, peace confirms greatness, temples remain, names endure. History is what happens when both voices are heard together. A person who meets Ramesses only through his own inscriptions hears presentation. A person who meets him only through correction may miss grandeur. The richest Ramesses stands between the two. He is the young king at Kadesh, perhaps afraid, certainly in danger, transforming crisis into royal myth. He is the builder at Abu Simbel, making a mountain speak his name. He is the husband who made Nefertari's image almost equal to his own at a sacred facade. He is the father who saw sons vanish before him. He is the diplomat whose treaty with Hittites outlasted both empires. He is the old man whose mummy shows pain. He is the name later kings borrowed, the statue poets broke into metaphor, the pharaoh filmmakers placed beside Moses, the ancient sovereign modern officials received with ceremony. That is why Ramesses still refuses to become simple. He is not one image. He is a series of masks, and behind every mask there is still a face. The name itself also deserves attention. Ramesses means something like Ra has fashioned him, or born of Ra, depending on how the royal name is rendered. It ties the king to the sun god at the level of identity. This was not a casual name. In Egypt, names were not labels floating outside a person. They participated in being. To name a king as shaped by Ra was to place him within the solar cycle, the daily victory of light over darkness, the return of order after night. The name already contained theology before any monument was built. His throne name, Usermater Setapenra, joined him to Ma'at and to Ra. Powerful is the justice, or truth, of Ra, chosen of Ra. Every formal royal name carried claims. Together, the titulary of a pharaoh created a verbal monument around the living king. Long before a statue was carved, language had already made him sacred. This is why the repetition of his names matters. On walls, statues, obelisks, scarabs, stelae, and temple scenes, the name functioned like a pulse. Each cartouche enclosed the king in a protective oval. Each reading reactivated him. Each repetition resisted oblivion. Ramesses understood that memory is not created once. It is renewed through repetition. The Egyptians also believed deeply in the power of images to stand in for reality. A statue could receive offerings. A painted scene could make an event ritually present. A carved enemy beneath the king's feet could help express the ongoing defeat of disorder. This does not mean Egyptians confused stone with living bodies in a simple way. It means they believed representation could participate in the life of what it represented. Ramesses filled Egypt with representations of himself because representation was a form of survival. This may help explain why his monuments do not feel merely decorative. They are not illustrations after the fact. They are instruments. The Kadesh reliefs do not simply show the battle. They continue to make the battle mean what Ramesses needed it to mean. Abu Simbel does not simply commemorate power. It continues to stage power every time the sun moves through the temple. Nefertari's tomb does not simply remember a queen. It helps her pass into eternity by surrounding her with the words and images that eternity required. The royal family, the gods, the enemies, and the land all become part of this visual machinery. Suns stand as continuity. Queens stand as fertility and alliance. Gods stand as approval. Captives stand as conquered disorder. Foreign lands stand as the outer ring of a world centered on Egypt. If we read the walls carefully, we see not only Ramesses' ego but the map of Egyptian reality as his court wanted it preserved. At the same time, there are moments when the human breaks through the machinery. Nefertari's titles are formal, but the care of her tomb feels personal. Kadesh is propaganda, but the panic behind it feels real. The treaty is political, but peace after years of rivalry must have brought relief to soldiers, traders, and border communities. The old mummy is royal, but the mouth with dental disease is simply a human mouth. These cracks in formality are where Ramesses becomes most alive. His world was also full of sound, which monuments cannot fully preserve. The scrape of chisels on stone, the chanting of priests in dim sanctuaries, the creak of chariot wheels, horses breathing before a campaign, the shouted orders of overseers at a quarry, the slap of river water against a barge carrying stone, musicians in palace halls, women mourning the dead, scribes murmuring as they copied formulas, foreign envoys speaking through translators. The public image of Egypt is often silent because it comes to us in stone, but the living Egypt of Ramesses was loud. It was also full of smell, incense and animal blood in ritual spaces, fresh bread and beer in workers' villages, mud after the flood, sweat in military camps, bitumen, wood, leather, oils, flowers, and desert dust, the sweetness of offerings placed before gods, the dry mineral smell of tomb corridors. The Nile carried life, but also mud, fish, reeds, and rot. Ancient grandeur was not clean marble under museum light. It was sensory, crowded, and physical. Remembering this helps rescue Ramesses from becoming only a statue. He ruled a world of bodies, bodies laboring, bodies fighting, bodies giving birth, bodies aging, bodies preserved after death. His own body stood at the center of a system that tried to transform flesh into divine order. But flesh remained flesh. His death must have required immediate ritual action. The body of the king had to be prepared for burial through mummification, protected with spells, amulets, wrappings, and coffins, and placed within the royal tomb equipped for the afterlife. The death of a pharaoh did not simply remove a ruler. It activated a dangerous transition. A new king had to take power. Ritual continuity had to be maintained. The deceased king had to be transformed into an effective dead ruler. Egypt had to move from one embodiment of Horus to the next without letting disorder enter. For Ramesses, this transition followed an unusually long reign. The people responsible for his burial were burying not just a man, but an age. Marinta's accession would have required the old formulas, but no formula could erase the weight of what had ended. When a king who has ruled for nearly 7 decades dies, time itself seems to change rulers. After burial, Ramesses entered another form of existence. Priests made offerings. His name remained in temples. His mortuary cult continued, but political attention shifted. The living always move forward, even when they honor the dead. Marinta had to answer new pressures. Later Ramesside kings had to face a harsher world. The old king's monuments remained as reassurance and burden. The burden of Ramesses was greatness itself. Later rulers could imitate him, but imitation proves the original cannot be repeated. They could take his name, copy his scenes, revive his style, and place themselves in his lineage of memory. Yet the conditions that made his reign possible were changing. The late New Kingdom would not simply continue the confidence of the 13th century BCE. Economic strain, external pressure, internal power shifts, and temple wealth would alter the balance. The stone still spoke of eternal order, while history moved underneath it. That is why Ramesses's reign feels like sunset as well as noon. The monuments blaze with confidence, but the age after him grows darker. He was not responsible for everything that followed, and he did not personally cause the later weakening of Egypt. But his reign stands so large near the edge of change that it has the feeling of a final great statement before the grammar of power began to shift. A final statement does not know it is final. That is its sadness. Ramesses built as if Egypt would always understand him. For a while it did. Then languages changed. Gods changed. Kingdoms changed. Christianity and Islam came to the Nile. Temples closed. Images were damaged. Sand entered courts. Travelers gave old kings Greek names. Archaeologists gave them catalog numbers. The sacred became historical. The historical became global. And still the name remained. Near the end of a day in Egypt, the monuments change color. The heat begins to loosen. Stone that looked white and hard at noon becomes gold, rose, purple, and shadow. The faces of colossal kings soften without becoming gentle. Birds cross the river. Tourists leave. Guards close gates. The temples return to something closer to silence. In that silence, Ramesses is both present and absent. The man is gone. The king remains. The boast is exposed. The achievement remains. The propaganda is readable. The beauty remains. The empire is dust. The name remains. That is the strange victory he actually won. Not the total victory at Kadesh. Not immortality in the literal sense. Not control over how every future age would understand him. His victory was more limited and more real. He made himself impossible to forget. And for a pharaoh of Egypt, that may have been the deepest victory of all. Sleep well. Good night.